Hello everyone. Today we're going to go over part 2 of Active Directory and pick up where we left off in part 1. So last place we talked about was the NTDS util function that stores all of the uh, different settings that we went over earlier. So we're going to pick back up here on the private data storing and replication. So basically what we're going to go over here is talk about private data. So private data is stored securely, and public directory data is stored on the shared system volume where it can be replicated to other domain controllers on the domain. For more information about replication, see the replication overview. So replication, usually if you have another Active Directory domain, you want to enable replication and make sure replication is working. So let's take a quick look at the replication overview, and let me go ahead and get my notes open here. Um, okay, so these are notes that we had earlier. We're going to go over replication because replication is very important if you have other Active Directory domain controllers. So, okay, so the overview. Um, Except for very small networks, the directory data must reside on more than one place on the network to be equally useful to all users. Through replication, the Active Directory service maintains replicas of directory data on multiple domain controllers, ensuring directory availability and performance for all users. Active Directory uses a multi-master replication model, allowing you to make directory changes at any domain controller, not just at a designated primary domain controller. Active Directory relies on the concept of sites to help keep replication efficient and on the knowledge consistency checker KCC to automatically determine the best replication topology for the network. Okay, so organizing data for replication. Data is stored on each domain controller in the directory store, which is divided logically into specific directory partitions. So let's take a quick look and see what we can find on the directory store. Go ahead and Google that. Okay, well, I don't know if there's anything that we can find off that, but okay, each partition stores a different type of directory data, either domain data, forest schema data, forest configuration data, or application data. All domain controllers within a forest hold a replica of the schema and configuration partitions for that forest, and all domain controllers within a particular domain hold a replica of the domain partition for their domain. Okay. Domain data, forest schema data. Let's get a little bit more information on what that is. So, okay, so schema, forest schema data. See if we can get back to our notes. And take a look around here. Okay, the schema defines what and how the Active Directory objects are stored. So that's good information that we want to keep. Schema. One thing we also want to make sure of is there's only one schema master per forest. So let's add that under, make a little schema box here so we have a good understanding of what schema is. Add some more notes in there. Okay. We'll come back and go over schema a little bit more in detail, but just to give everyone an idea of what schema is, I'm going to add these things as notes here. Basically defines what and how Active Directory objects are stored and relates to schema. But we'll try to dive deeper into exactly getting as much of an understanding of schema as we can. Because I know when I first started learning Active Directory, I thought it was kind of a weird word to learn, and I never really had a formal understanding of it. So schema is actually very good. Contains definitions and rules for creating and manipulating objects and attributes. It's a little bit more vague. Yeah, it's a pretty decent idea. Contains. Okay. Well, we'll come back to that in the meantime. We're going to have some of this here in our notes. So let's go back to replication and organizing the data. So all domain controllers within the forest hold a replica of the schema and configuration partitions for that forest, and all domain controllers within a particular domain hold a replica of the domain partition for their domain. Application directory partitions hold directory data specific to a particular application and can be stored by a domain controllers belonging to different domains. Changes to each directory partition are replicated to all other domain controllers that hold a copy of that partition. Replication also ensures the availability of global catalog through the entire forest. The global catalog is a searchable directory store containing data about every object in all domains. Excuse me. The global catalog is stored by domain controllers for which the global catalog has been enabled. So the global catalog is a searchable directory store containing data about every object in all domains. I think that's important to have, so I'm going to go ahead and add this to our notes. Okay. Improving replication efficiency with sites. To help make replication more efficient, Active Directory relies on sites. Sites, defined as groups of well-connected computers, determines how directory data is replicated. Active Directory replicates directory information within a site more frequently than among sites. This way, the best connected domain controllers, those most likely to need particular directory information, receive replicated updates first. The domain controllers and other sites also receive the changes, but less frequently, reducing network bandwidth consumption. For more information, see how replication works and sites overview. All right, so this is one last part I'm going to go over here. We don't really need to figure out about the enhancements of Windows Server 2003, but so determining the replication topology, the knowledge consistency checker, the KCC. Let's take a look at the KCC. So It's a little bit of an idea of replication. This is also Active Directory sites and services where replication generally takes place, where it gets kicked off. So let's take a look here. And it looks like this is how it takes place. Let's read a little bit more into it. So the KCC, a process running on each domain controller, automatically identifies the most efficient replication topology for your network based on information you provide about your network and Active Directory sites and services. The KCC regularly recalculate the replication topology to adjust for any network changes that may have occurred. The KCC of one domain controller within each site, the inter-site topology generator determines inter-site replication topology. Okay, so that's an idea, just bird's eye view of all of this. So that's replication. Gives you kind of an idea of what is used during that, the KCC through AD sites and services, replication efficiency with sites. So it's good information, but we're going to keep focusing on other topics here. So directory data replicated between domain controllers include the following: domain data. The domain data holds information about objects within a domain. This is information such as email contacts, user and computer account attributes, and published resources that are of interest to administrators and users. For example, when a user account is added to your network, a user account object and attribute data are stored in the domain data. When changes to your organization's directory objects occur, such as object creation, deletion, or attribute modification, this data is stored in the domain data. Okay. So domain data holds information about objects within the domain, which is user accounts being added, which is an object, and attribute data. So that's one of the things that gets replicated. Another item is configuration data. The configuration data describes the topology of the directory. This configuration data includes a list of domains, trees, and forests, and the locations of the domain controllers and global catalogs. So this is basically the topology of the directory. Includes a list of all domains, if there's multiple domains, trees, and forests. And we'll go over trees and forests in a bit because that's pretty important. It may also mention it in the information we have on Active Directory. So schema data. The schema is a formal definition of all object and attribute data that can be stored in the directory, which we mentioned earlier. Domain controllers running Windows Server 2003 include a default schema that defines many object types such as user and computer accounts, groups, domains, and OUs, organizational units, and security policies. Administrators and programmers can extend the schema by defining new object types and attributes or by adding new attributes for existing objects. Schema objects are protected by access control lists, ensuring that only authorized users can alter the schema. Finally, application data. Data stored in the application directory partition is intended to satisfy cases where information needs to be replicated, but not necessarily on a global scale. Application directory partitions are not part of the directory data stored by default. They must be created, configured, and managed by the administrator. So this is application data. Basically, if you have an application running, it sounds like is what gets transferred over. So directory data replicated between domain controllers. So we're going to add this under replication. Just a quick note on what gets transferred over during replication. So make this list. And we're going to copy these. We're not going to go into detail about the domain data and everything like that, but domain data, configuration data. schema data. And application data. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're going to skip that last part here. So this is the directory data store. So let's go back to the original article that we were reading in the last video. These are sub articles that were added. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one and close this one. I'll leave that one open for now. But so this is where we were originally. So security is integrated with Active Directory through logon authentication and access control to objects in the directory. Within a single network logon, administrators can manage directory data and organization throughout their network. And authorized network users can access resources anywhere on the network. Policy-based administration eases the management of even the most complex network. For more information about Active Directory security, see Security Overview. Let's take a quick look at this. This kind of just goes over the best practices for securing Active Directory. There's a lot of information here. You can get the executive summary, which is basically just talks about the best way of reducing attacks on your network by following these steps. So it's good information to look over. It's not going to be helpful in learning about Active Directory, but if you are a network administrator or a system administrator, you do want to look over this if you're setting up a new network to just make sure to add some of these steps here. So these are best practices, but we're going to skip that for now. So Active Directory also includes a set of rules, the schema that defines classes of objects and attributes contained in the directory, the constraints and limits on instances of these objects, and the format of their names. So here's a whole thing on schema that we're talking about. Active Directory schema is implemented as a set of object class instances stored in the directory. This is very different than many directories that have a schema but stored it as a text file read at startup. Storing the schema in the directory has many advantages. For example, user applications can read it to discover what objects and properties are available. Active Directory schema can be updated dynamically. That is, an application can extend the schema with new attributes and classes to use the extensions immediately. Schema updates are accomplished by creating or modifying the schema object stored in the directory. Like every object in Active Directory, access control lists, ACLs, protect schema objects, so authorized users only may alter the schema. So, access control lists, let's take a look at what those are, if we have any idea what they are. Just give a list of rules that specify which users are granted or denied particular objects. Let's see where that is specifically on Active Directory, if we can find it there. Okay. System access control list. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and close this here. Keep moving ahead. So that's an overview of schema. Global catalog that contains information about every object in the directory. This allows users and administrators to find directory information regardless of which domain in the directory actually contains the data. For more information about global catalog, let's take a look at that. Global catalog allows users and applications to find objects in Active Directory domain tree given one or more attributes of the target object. Okay. Query and index mechanisms so that objects and their properties can be published and found by network users or applications. For more information, look into here. And a replication service that distributes directory data across a network. All domain controllers in a domain participate in replication and contain a complete copy of all directory information in their domain. Any changes to directory data is replicated to all domain controllers in the domain. And here's where you go for more information on that. So these are the Active Directory items that are included that are super important. So I'll go ahead and add this to my list, and we'll take a short break here and come back to part 3 with intro and understanding of Active Directory.